Hi everybody, Sean here at Go Big Bore or Go Home with another installment of First Friday Fives. You know those big bore calibers that brought performance to new levels? Cartridges that set new records, expanded the versatility of a handgun, that made us all head to the internet forums to proudly declare that we were going to buy something chambered for it when the local gun shop opened? Well, you're in for a treat, because this month we're talking about none of them. That's right, we're talking about the cartridges that went down in flames so incredibly that their legacy is the fact that most folks out there have no clue they even exist. This is the list of the top 5 big bore cartridges that failed epically. These are cartridges that never caught on, cartridges that consistently make us ask, what the hell were they thinking with this crap? Cartridges that never took off because they missed their intended target audience. See what I did there? Never performed like they were supposed to, and or never really developed a cult following either. So sit back and relax as we look at 5 of the biggest big bore failures of all time. Number 5. The 45 Glock Auto Pistol, aka the 45 Gap. Now, one could argue that this cartridge isn't a total failure, as the ammunition is still being produced today and handguns are still being produced in this caliber by one manufacturer, Glock. Okay, to be fair, Bond Arms does offer barrels for their Derringers in 45 Gap as well. The 45 Gap is essentially a 45 ACP with a stronger case head and cut down by 0.143 inches or 3.6 millimeters. I'm measurably curious. To make up for the loss of powder room, the Gap operates at 45 ACP plus P pressures, meaning 23,000 psi. If you've handled the Glock 21 or the Glock 30, you know they have much larger frames to accommodate the size of the 45 ACP cartridge. Glock's idea was to be able to get the 45 ACP power in a standard size Glock. It sounds like a great idea, right? I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Well, how about the high cost of ammo? And reduced capacity? Sure, you shorten the round, but you can't change the diameter and still have a 45, so that width is going to eat up valuable space in a smaller frame. A full-size Glock in 45 Gap limits you to 10 rounds. But that's the standard capacity for us guys. What's the big deal? Shut up, California. No one cares about your opinion on this, and I don't want to hear a peep out of any of you other capacity-limiting states. Thank you. Now, where was I? Oh, capacity. So yeah, 10 rounds of 45 Gap in a standard size Glock. Or, 15 rounds of 40 Smith & Wesson. It's a pretty darn effective round too, just saying. Want a compact like a Glock 19 or a 23? How does 8 rounds strike you? I mean, my preferred carry gun is a Glock 30S, which is about the same size, and I get 10 rounds of 45 ACP. So what gives? Going to subcompact leaves you with 6 rounds, which is the same as the single-stack Glock 36 in 45 ACP. The gun might be more reasonably sized overall, but with reduced capacity and other caliber options that are just as effective available, color me thoroughly unimpressed. I'm not saying this cartridge doesn't work, because it does, but you sacrifice a lot just to get the dream of a 45 and a standard size pistol. And this revelation has not been lost on the gun buying community at large. While other manufacturers gave this round a try, like Springfield did with their XD, they ultimately abandoned the sinking ship. Glock still produces the Glock 37, 38, and 39, but only made the 37 in its 4th generation model. So this caliber might disappear from production sometime in the future. If it does, don't be surprised if no one notices. Number 4. The 45 Super. Sometimes the best laid plans of mice and men go awry, am I right? For anyone familiar with the 38 Super, this will sound familiar. You take an older cartridge from when semi-auto gun design and metallurgy were significantly less advanced, add some more powder, increase pressure, and now you have a cartridge that performs to modern day levels. Sounds good, right? It worked for the 38 Auto, so why not the 45 ACP? Now, a word of caution before we continue. The 45 Super was designed to increase the velocities of the 45 ACP and thus has far higher pressures, 28,000 psi over the standard 21,000, meaning it requires your gun to be altered to handle it, and you need to buy the correctly head-stamped brass. Starline's 45 Super Brass has a thicker web, denser grain structure in the metal, and is heat-treated to increase strength. And if you want to shoot it, talk to a good gunsmith first, as internet guidance is often detrimentally wrong, and you will need to have properly modified handguns to be safe when shooting this cartridge. Developed by Dean Grinnell in 1988 and perfected with the help of gunsmith Ace Hinman? I hope I'm pronouncing this right. If not, apologies. The 45 Super started out by cutting down cases from the 451 Detonics Magnum, which itself was cut down from the 45 Winchester Magnum. They achieved success settling on velocities of 1,300 feet per second for 185 grain bullets, 1,200 feet per second for 200 grain bullets, and 1,100 feet per second for 230 grain bullets. That set it on par with the mighty 10mm for muzzle energy. Impressive! And by 1995, Ace's son Gary, who took over after Ace's passing, was producing modification kits for 1911s in their shop, Ace Custom 45s. Hell, by that point, there was legitimate 45 Super Brass and some factory ammo too. How'd it fall apart? Well, there's a few reasons. The first was that the original conversions were designed to convert any 1911, and as time went on, certain modifications were becoming, well, standard features on most 1911s. Things like a lowered and flared ejection port, an extended ejector. This made consumers question what part of the conversion they really needed to pay for. To be honest, this is still an issue, as I'm playing around with this cartridge right now, and I don't have a definitive answer after tons of research. But the real death knell for the 45 Super was a common one for new products: licensing. After Ace Custom 45s trademarked the 45 Super name, anyone using it had to pay royalties. So despite Springfield being willing to pay a few bucks for one model, other folks, like say Smith & Wesson, weren't interested in coughing up the money. Realistically, how many people knew about it, and how many of those would buy a gun chambered for it? When Taurus decided to reveal a 45 Super handgun at SHOT Show one year, the lawyer for Ace Custom 45s walked over to the booth to inform them that they would have to work out a licensing agreement with Ace Custom 45s. As you might expect, the idea was scrapped on the spot and the attorney told to get lost. With no one chambering it from the factory, and no one trusting that the price charged for a conversion was justified, the 45 Super fell into obscurity and unfortunately became nothing more than a whisper among wildcatters. Number 3. The 500 Special. Sometimes things look better on paper than in execution. In 2004, when Smith & Wesson released the beast that is the 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum, the idea to have a less powerful round with more manageable recoil seemed like a good one. I mean, why not? Shooters had been shooting 38 Special out of their 357 Magnum revolvers, 44 Special out of their 44 Magnum revolvers, and in the 1980s, custom gun builder Hamilton Bowen even created the 41 Special for 41 Magnum shooters. And folks shooting 454 Casull had been shooting 45 Colt loads as well. So the idea for a 500 Special cartridge was a sound one. In theory. Again, in theory, this makes all kinds of sense. But practically speaking, it's a different story. Consider that the 357 Magnum, 41 Magnum, and 44 Magnum all had a max brass case length of 1.285 inches, while all of their special variants had a max case length of 1.16 inches. The 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum really wasn't a one-to-one here, as it has a maximum overall case length of 1.625 inches. Other cartridges in the 1.6-inch family aren't Magnums, but Maximums and Super Mags. This meant to drop the brass length to the standard special length of 1.16 inches would mean cutting off almost a half inch of brass. Normally going from Magnum length to special length would only trim 1/8 of an inch, so that's 372% of the normal length reduction. So they opted to make the 500 Special a Magnum length cartridge at 1.285 inches, cutting down 0.34 inches of brass, or a mere 272% of the normal length reduction. Much better, right. Along with dropping brass length to 1.285 inches, they dropped the max pressure to a much more manageable 36,000 psi and actually got one load SAMI certified. The 500 Special would shoot a 350 grain bullet at 1,375 feet per second. Now that may seem tame when compared to a 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum that fires a 350 grain bullet at a jaw-dropping 1,800 feet per second, but you're still dealing with Magnum level performance here. Granted, in the Behemoth X-frame, it was considerably more manageable. But with the increased free float room that the bullet has to fly through before hitting the cylinder throat, which some consider to hurt accuracy, and the fact that a wise and careful reloader could reduce their 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum loads to this general area of velocity, nobody really noticed or wanted to buy separate brass to reload or separate ammo that was pretty much just as expensive as the normal 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum ammo. The 500 Special ended up having to answer to the tune of "Nobody cares. Nobody cares." The ammo disappeared from the shelves, and the brass ceased production. Nobody wanted to shoot a less powerful cartridge in the most powerful handgun in the world. I mean, talk about talking the talk, but not walking the walk. If Smith & Wesson had made a short-cylinder X-frame, it is speculated that revolvers specifically chambered for 500 Special may have sold well and saved the cartridge from the abyss that is apathy. But that's just a hunch. It hasn't completely died, though. Custom gunsmiths have made conversions on revolvers to chamber the round, and just recently Starline brought back the brass for reloading. This saves the 500 Special lovers from having to chop down 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum brass. But except for the few that have found a special place for it in their heart, the 500 Special was a cartridge that was pretty much dead on arrival. Number 2. The 440 Corbon. Well, this cartridge falls into that all-too-familiar category of almost a good idea. Looking to up the ante of what performance you could wring out of a 44 caliber bullet, the folks at Corbon created this big-bore Bizarro round by necking down a 50 Action Express casing to accept a .429-inch bullet. The objective was to get performance similar to a 445 Super Mag for hunting and silhouette shooting with the overall cartridge length of a regular 44 Magnum. And truth be told, they succeeded with a 240 grain bullet making 1,800 feet per second. Not bad at all. Yet, have you heard of this round before? If the answer is no, that's not surprising. Given that the 440 Corbon was designed on the 50 Action Express brass, it's probably fairly obvious that it was always intended for the Desert Eagle pistol with that rebated rim. Not really going to do very well in a revolver with that. Well, it didn't do well in the Desert Eagle either. The consistency of the shoulder on the cartridge wasn't very good, which created variations in head spacing and thus a problem with reliability. And while the cartridge gave superior performance when compared to the 44 Magnum, it never really gained any mainstream acceptance. While Magnum Research did make some Desert Eagle pistols and barrels in the 440 Corbon, and Tromex also made a few AR uppers chambered in it as well, the lack of interest ultimately meant that the cartridge was destined to find itself on the list of extinct calibers. Soon, neither company was producing anything for the caliber, and given its rarity, Desert Eagles or barrels in 440 Corbon for it are really, really expensive. Ammo and brass are gone, although you can get reloading dies. But this is one cartridge that, like the E.T. video games for the original Atari 2600 console, showed promise in concept only to disappoint in execution. Who knows, maybe there's a New Mexico landfill that has unsold 440 Corbon Desert Eagle and AR components buried in it. Number 1. Drumroll please. The 41 Action Express. I know what you're thinking right now. You guys are making this up, aren't you? Nope, this is for real. So what the hell is it? A 41 Magnum powered semi-auto cartridge like the 50 Action Express? Well, no, but it was created by the same guy. Designed by Evan Wilden in 1986, the 41AE was a 41 caliber semi-auto cartridge cut down from a 41 Magnum brass casing with a rebated rim that matched the dimensions of the 9x19mm NATO. There were two goals. The first was to make a round that was usable in a semi-auto pistol frame that was the same size as a 9mm, and to get power that was around the same as a 41 Magnum police load. This was honestly not a bad idea. Pistols could be converted with a new barrel and a magazine, as could the Israeli military's Uzi submachine guns. And they liked that, and did use this round a little bit. The second was to get the 170 grain bullet up to at least 940 feet per second, which it had no trouble doing. In fact, IMI produced 170 grain rounds that could get up to 1,215 feet per second, standing shoulder to shoulder with the 10mm auto. So there's quite a range there, and all of it useful. Yet it's obscure as the Star Wars Christmas special. So something evidently didn't work. Despite being chambered in the Jericho 941, aka the MRI Baby Eagle, the Taurus PT-92, and the aforementioned Uzi, the cartridge failed to really take off. And there were two very good reasons why. The first is that the 10mm auto was already a thing in 1986, even if it wasn't a common thing. So that kind of power was already available in another cartridge. If you wanted something more than 9mm but less than a 10mm, it would certainly do that. But when the 40 Smith & Wesson arrived in January of 1990, the 41 AE was pretty much finished. The new 40 Smith & Wesson could do what the 41 AE did, and brass and bullets were already out there considering that the 10mm had been around since 1983. The second reason for the 41 AE's demise was a matter of practicality. The 41 caliber bullets it used were only available for the 41 Magnum cartridge, which was itself still struggling. So, with other calibers that could compete ballistically more available due to time and some contracts from law enforcement, and with rare ammo and ammo components, the 41AE was fighting a battle up Mount Everest. It was eventually taken out back behind the barn and mercifully put down. So let's run those back before we go. Number 5, the 45 Gap, an answer in search of a problem. Number 4, the 45 Super, more power but not enough to keep it alive. Number 3, the 500 Special, because being the little brother to the 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum is not a good thing. Number 2, the 440 Corbon. If it worked, it would have been great. And number 1, the 41 Action Express. Too much competition, too little practicality. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed the list. Are there any other big bore failure to launch calibers you think should have been on this list? If so, comment below. I'm going to try and play catch up here on our first Friday 5s videos, so look forward to me doing so by the end of the year. I have added some new gear and software that I am learning to use as I go. Let us know if you have ideas for lists you want to see, and remember, go big bore or go home.